Whilst I've said that I want the course to be more practical, I still think that theory is a fundamental aspect of understanding. So I'm going to go through some of the basics of what an outliner is and how it is helpful. An outliner is a specialized type of text editor which arranges your information in a branching structure. And this is called the tree. One way to think of it is as a mind map, but with text. And this is an example of the tree of information right here, where this is one level, then another level, and another level. So hypothetically, this might be the trunk of information, and this would be a branch, and then this lowest level would be a leaf. And in that way, I can refine the information as I go up. But it's all done linearly as opposed to a branching tree upwards. So it's structured in that way. And what it allows you to do is quickly structure and add hierarchy to your notes. And it can be as simple or as complex as required. And the way that we achieve these branches, as we've looked at with the shortcuts, is by using indentation. So tab to indent, and then shift tab to unindent. Moving on to the key features of an outliner, you can see here that I'm using the arrows over here, but I can also control down when clicking that node to expand this. And the first thing, as I've mentioned, is that it creates hierarchy through this indentation and nesting. And the other thing is that it allows for collapsing and expanding different levels of your hierarchy, which is what I've just done. So you can use the shortcuts, or you can use that little arrow over there. And this allows you to minimize the content that isn't relevant and easily traverse multiple levels of your hierarchy. Another thing that allows me to do is to zoom into and out of different parts of the hierarchy. So I could just click on that node over there, and then I get a single node focus. And this allows you to focus on one thing at a time and hide what isn't relevant. And another way that I could do that is if I just say Alt left, and I could go in and now zoom into this next part over here, which is where my cursor is. If I just use the circle over there, and if I say Alt right, this allows the easy reordering or sequencing of information. So you can move parts of your hierarchy up or down in addition to left or right, and that preserves the structure of the information that you're moving. And one of the originators of outliners, Dave Weiner, spoke about this as text on rails. So if I just zoom out there, when I zoom back here, and if I expand all of these just using the carrots, there's other ways to do it. But if I say Alt Shift up and I move that over there, it preserves the original structure. I've added a note here to call out the fact that Tana uses what is called logical outlining. So if I unindent this over here, this exact node, it doesn't preserve it in that structure. It takes it to the next level. So it's saying this was a higher level of information. If I just undo that there, it might be that you'd expect that to go over here and that note outlining to remain underneath there. But Tana removes it from that structure and takes it to that higher level and preserves this node over here in place. So just looking at that again, Shift Tab, that remains there, but this one goes to the highest level. If I now were to tab that again, it doesn't go back to its original position. This is quite helpful if you are moving nodes around, but it can be a little bit tricky at first. Just undoing that and moving it back. How to effectively navigate your outlines. I'm going to use Alt right to go in there, or I could also click on that node over there. And the first important point is Tab and Shift Tab. So Tab indents nodes and Shift Tab unindents them. So I can do this here, Shift Tab and Tab. Collapsing and expanding nodes, really helpful to use the shortcuts. If I say Control up there, it collapses that, and Control down expands the node. So that collapsing is hiding all of the nodes that are indented underneath the current node. Or if I'm in this node and there's nothing underneath it, it will collapse into the node above it. Control Shift page up and Control Shift page down collapse and expand everything. I have sometimes found these to not be very effective. So what I would do is I'll just say Command K and I'll say collapse children. And then it collapses everything over there. And similarly, I can say Control K, expand children, and it expands all of those nodes. And then the important one for me is just reorienting my nodes or reordering my nodes. It's Alt Shift up and Alt Shift down. Now, when you're working with an outliner, I highly recommend that you become comfortable with these, as it'll massively speed up your workflow. At the risk of confusing matters, I also want to bring up this part here for users who are migrating from other tools. And this is the idea of inheritance and being able to filter on nodes. So what I'm talking about here is if I'm looking for this target information over here, ideally what I'd want to be able to do is go to node A and then filter for other references to node B to be able to refine my search. So if I open up node A in the right, you can see here that there's no option to filter just yet. I could go open this and then go and find where node B is also. In an ideal world, I'd be able to filter for node B, but from a simple user interface, it's not available in this panel over here. I also want to look at the different relationships between nodes in an outliner, because this becomes important later on, especially when you're learning how to query and search for information. The three primary relationships are parent nodes, child nodes, and sibling nodes. So a parent node is a node with one or more nodes indented underneath it. So this over here is a parent node, as is this node over here. And if I were to zoom out a level, this relationships between nodes in an outliner is also a parent node. All of these are parent nodes. A child node is a node that is indented or nested underneath another node. So this one over here is a child node. But this child node itself is also owned or indented underneath these three primary relationships. And the sibling nodes is a node indented underneath the parent node at the same level. So these three over here, parent nodes, child nodes, and sibling nodes, are all siblings. This might be a little bit confusing, so let's look at an example. And the thing that I want to call out there is that the node types are not mutually exclusive, as I've pointed out, that one node can be both a parent node, a sibling node, and a child node. So in this example over here, A is a sibling of B, and B is in a parent of C and D. And as I've mentioned, it's also a sibling of A. C is a child of B and a sibling of D, and then D is also the parent of E, in addition to being the child of B and the sibling of C. At the lowest level here, E is just the child of D. So that's just to break down that hierarchy very clearly and give you an example of what the names mean. Now, sibling is not super important, but it's just helpful to understand what things are at the different level. Having something be a child of and a parent becomes very important down the line. Why do we indent at all? Well, indentation is the most basic mechanism for adding relationships or structure in your workspace. It's essentially saying this thing belongs underneath this thing or is an extension of this thing potentially. And I think of nodes in my outliner as folders almost. So this parent node acts as a folder for these different nodes. And the child node provides additional information on the point in the first node. So there is some sort of relationship between these nodes. These nodes here are all constituents of this higher level node. If I zoom out, this whole course is structured in a single outline node. So being able to go and see that structure and how different things are arranged, one could imagine that I have different folders where all the modules were in a different folder. For me, they are all now in the outline. Just opening up our example again, because I think there's additional terminology that is important to be aware of, especially as you come later on to queries. It's talking about ancestors, grandparents, and descendants. So ancestor means a node that is above a certain node in the hierarchy. So for this node over here, its ancestors are additional terminology to be aware of and relationships between nodes in an outliner. Grandparents refers to nodes that are two above in the structure. So if I look at E, it's a child of D and a grandchild of B. Maybe to put it more clearly, B is the grandparent to E. So D is the parent, but B is the parent of D, which is the parent of E. Therefore, it is the grandparent of E. And then descendants, E is a descendant of D, which is also a descendant of B. So in the same way that B is an ancestor of E, E is a descendant of B. This might seem a bit trivial as I'm mentioning it over here, but I just wanted to make it extremely clear how these different things are related.